multinational corporation. First of all, do you agree with these relatively rosy assessments of the U.S. economy at this point? And how much do you think that President Obama does or doesn't deserve credit for that?
So I want to pick up from where Penny was with her assessment of the U.S. economy today. And if you think of the global economy in its various forms, the U.S. economy is the strongest engine on our aircraft of the global economy. The other engines aren't as strong. Some of them aren't actually even functioning at all, like in Europe, and that's a whole other topic. That's not happened by accident. That's happened because of deliberate policies, and I give President Obama due credit for that. I've been CEO for 11 years, and 6 years of that has been under the Obama administration. And I've been going to Washington to be a participant in the policy conversation. I think CEOs today of US global multinationals in particular, who are operating by different rules of the road around the world, have to really bring the highest standard to the conversation wherever those conversations take place. We have to participate in the trade conversations. We have to participate in the immigration discussion on human capital. We have to bring the very best standards that we learn over decades of operating, and in Dow's case, 118 years young, and to figure out how to bring those standards around the world so it's fair. And fairness, okay, versus free, fairness, okay, is because you've got dialogue in the policy setting process from the constituencies that matter. The regulators and the regulated. I mean, it's often said about Washington, it's not my quote, but I'll say it, it's funny. You know, you either go there because if you don't go there, you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Okay? And literally, okay, literally, Washington feels like that a lot. And I really like to say that where the tailwinds have occurred, with due credit to the administration, where the tailwinds are occurring in the United States, it is in a lot of the United States' inherent strengths. Its workforce, its ability to have a mobile workforce, its education system, its entrepreneurialism, its freedoms, its immigration policies. These are its strengths. Now, what has happened is we play to those strengths, and energy has become a major competitive advantage. And all of us, with the economic crisis of 08-09, have restructured because we've had the freedom to restructure. We've taken down our cost curves. We're globally competitive. We can export out of the United States. We've reskilled a lot of our workforce with a lot more work to do. That's all happening in the United States today, which is why the US is ahead of the world in what the world currently needs. A lot more work to do. And I think the question of the next 2 years, the politics of uncertainty that we saw over these last few years with the dysfunctionality of Congress and the administration in all of its various facets. Look, I was vice chair of the Business Roundtable, chair of the Business Council. We'd get people in and we'd ask for the center to appear. Mm-hmm. That would start to go down from 20 people to 10 people with the various elections to no people. The center started to disappear in Congress. And that became a problem. People would not take a stand on what compromise would look like. The politics of uncertainty leads to the economics of uncertainty. That's now behind us. I am full of hope that the business tax reform agenda the President laid out, the trade agenda the President laid out, immigration in its various forms can be done in this next year or two. That'll juice the American economy even further. We've got more headwinds and more work. I agree in the area of regulations. We're way over-regulated. So we need work in that area. Energy policy, I can't wait for the United States to finally put together an energy policy that works. But in the main, the United States is on the right track. And these next 2 years, with Congress in the way it is, in a strange sort of way, both houses being Republican, this is maybe the best chance we have to get the right outputs on policy.
Cecilia, this is an oddly optimistic group. I'm quite amazed. Most Washington conversations are not. As the dean of the Wilson School at Princeton, you have a little bit of a remove. This gap between our collective policy aspirations, the can-do ethic that you often see in the states or in cities versus a sort of hopelessness that had set in around this pervasive sense of Washington gridlock. First of all, do you share this optimism that we're hearing today? And taking a longer view, what is your view as an academic about whether American politics has moved into some new phase of dysfunction or it's connected with the economy and the disruptions of recent years?
So as I was thinking about the panel, I kept thinking, this must be the shortest panel at Davos because they're going to get nothing done. But that was just a joke, right? I was just quipping to myself. I think more seriously, I think part of the reason why there's a little bit of optimism right now is because if you think about the incentives for the president, who obviously wants to be a president he's accomplished a lot already, and he wants to be known as a president that got a lot done. And then you have a Republican-controlled Congress, which, if they do nothing, will have been responsible for doing nothing, and they can't blame it on something else. And the fact that they don't have a veto-proof majority in the Senate. It means that in order for them both to accomplish some goals, they have to work together, and they're going to have to find common ground somewhere. So I think because those incentives are aligned is part of the reason why there's some hope. And as we were talking about beforehand, it's also the last two Congresses have been the lowest performing Congresses since, what was it, World War II. So the bar's pretty low. There's nowhere to go but up.
Does it bother you, Congressman, when people say the do-nothing Congress, the do-nothing Congress? Does that bother you?
I've been busy.
Doing something.
No, it's a frustration of our system. And in the House of Representatives, just as an example, the Keystone Pipeline. I know the president's already said he's going to veto it, but we passed that in an afternoon in the House of Representatives, in an afternoon. The Senate took it up on the same day, which was their first week that they were in session. It will take them almost 4 weeks to pass that same bill or a similar bill. And on their first vote, they had 63 members agree to have the discussion on Keystone Pipeline. And at the end of the day, they have 60 votes for the Keystone Pipeline. This is a widely agreed upon bill in the Senate, and this is moving quickly in the Senate. It's almost 4 weeks. So there's some frustration on that system. It is the system, though, where we've had some of the greatest successes in American history. And to Cecilia's point on the divided government opportunity here, we had welfare reform, a balanced budget, and the biggest rewrite in telecom policy in 50 years done with a Republican House, Republican Senate, and a Democrat president in the 1990s. It is possible for us to do rational and good things for the American people, and it is incumbent upon us to act. That also means that instead of asking for 100%, whether it's the president or whether it's House Republicans or Senate Democrats or whatever group, we're going to have to work through to see what we can achieve and what we can agree upon.
So I want to bring Cecilia back in the question, but I must say, having covered and lived through the Washington of President Clinton and divided government, I never thought that you would hear a Republican member of the leadership look back with nostalgia on those days as a legislative high watermark.
Well, no, but I mean, look at the production, right? And then the president says, well, these Republicans are different than they were in the 1990s. I would remind you of what the Republicans in the House did with Bill Clinton in 1998, right? And we're not talking about that. It's not like there was some merry band of camaraderie in the 1990s, right?
Clearly not.
So, I mean, yeah,
No, but to your
not.
point, that even people who violently disagree in the most personal of ways
Right.
can
and if you
can
just
pass
read American
legislation.
history, we just love this fight in Washington. It's just part of the discussion. The frustration we have, though, talking to the editor of Politico here, is that we know to the smallest degree, to the microscopic level of what happens in debates. So if we didn't like Washington when we had only the evening news, imagine when you know play by play, moment by moment, how that sausage is made, right? And the American people like it even less because they know even more. And so that's a telltale lesson for me that we have to get things done.
I'm glad the lesson isn't that we should know less.
Right.
Cecilia.
I'm sorry, which part did you want to?
No, I thought you wanted to jump back in on this question of the inherent gridlock in the system or not.
I mean, I have to admit that when it comes to how we've set up, between the House and the Senate, which I think the Senate was designed to be a little bit more deliberative than the House, and it seems to me the House is always working. But I think when we're thinking do nothing, we mean in terms of what actually gets passed. I do think that you asked from the academic side, there is some concern that in the U.S. That we, part of it, if you look at our media, it's gotten more polarized, and that there's a feeling that our population's gotten more polarized, and that there is less of an understanding, and not just in Washington, but that this is coming from the bottom up. and that will have some consequences for our democracy. That's a little bit gloom and doom, and I'm not saying that I think that we're about to cave under the weight of Rome or something, but I think that there is some concern that that polarization is actually reflecting more of what's happening around the country.
Governor Hickenlooper, you come from a state that obviously is a pretty contested state politically. It's voted Democratic